All right, thank you very much. And now I'm going to proceed and embarrass myself terribly with my, I think, a year or 2 years of high school Spanish that I took, and I'll proceed to butcher these Spanish names. And maybe Michelle can help me out as I introduce her. Um, as already stated, Michelle is a Mexico City-based director and screenwriter who graduated from the Centro de Capacitación. Uh,
Capacitación.
thank you, cinematography. She was awarded Cheving Scholarship to study in the United Kingdom, where she completed an MFA in film directing at Goldsmiths University of London. Her debut, Huesera, The Bone Woman, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2022, where it won the Best New Narrative Director and the Nora Ephron Award. And she continued to collect over 30 accolades from international film festivals from around the world, including the Sitges Film Festivals, Citizen Kane Award for Best New Director, and Blood Window Award for the Best Ibero-American Film. She is currently in pre-production for her second feature film, Palizada,
Yeah.
with the production company Piano, Annette Triangle of Sadness, with El Studio, Dance of the 41. She is working on a feature adaptation of a short story, That Summer in the Dark, by the multi-award-winning Argentinian writer, Marina Enriquez. So thank you for joining us, Michelle. And I do have a number of prepared questions, as was already stated. And I do, though, I certainly want to leave time for those that are joining us to have an opportunity to ask you a few questions as well. So thank you. I'd like to just begin with some influences. General influences first. I know certainly when I was a kid, I would rewatch certain films over and over and over on VHS tape. And I just wonder if there were certain films that caught your attention or captivated you and proved to be a long-term influence for you.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor. Really happy to be here talking with all of you. Well, I grew up being very obsessed, like the kind of obsessive teenager, watching many films, like that kind of teenager that we were like even making lists of our 20 favorite films every week and watching so many. But I have to say that I wasn't especially focused on horror. Like I had many influences. I mean, I think one that I do remember having like an obsession that maybe I share with a lot of teenagers or people is Rocky Horror Picture Show, which really like affected me when I discovered it as a teenager, and I was obsessed with it with many of my friends. And I really, more than the narrative in that film, I really love the conversation that the cult aspect of Rocky Horror, like what it created in every city, having these like weekly screenings, like those aspects from that film make real, like to have like becoming these like appearances of little worlds or subcultures. I love that. And I was very obsessed with watching many films about punk, like I remember having like this film Times Square, like the one that happens in New York. That was one that was big for me as well. And Greg Araki, like Mysterious Skin, was also one of my favorite films, still is. John Waters, I was obsessed with all John Waters films for a while, and like glam films like Absolute Beginners, and another one was Breakfast on Pluto. And let me think, I'm trying to be like really like from my teenage years what I was obsessed. Of course, a Velvet Goldmine, like everything musical, like slash like otherworldly, like it had a lot of genre aspects, but it was I think I was very into musical films that that kind of brought like fantastic, or also what's the name? Hedwig and the Angry Inch was also one of the big ones, I guess, for me. And of course, when I found Polanski, I was like in my first year in film school, maybe in 2009, and I was very obsessed with The Tenant. I think that's the film that I watched more than 20 times, and Repulsion, and of course Rosemary Baby. And then I really got into like Don't Look Now, Possession, Jacob's Ladder. Like when I discovered, I think like when I really discovered this kind of horror that it's really built by understanding cinema language, I guess that's when I really understood what I wanted to do with my career.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and you know, the affinities with Rosemary's Baby and Huesera seems pretty self-evident, I think. But I don't know, did you have any other things in mind when you're formulating the narrative for Huesera in terms of just story content?
Of course, I love, I am a very sound director. I'm very sound focusing, like since the script. I do build a lot the story from things that you can hear outside of the frame. And I find that a lot in films from Lynn Ramsey and Lucrecia Martel. I think those two, they are like great influences for me. I feel like they build sound in the best ways. For example, also, we had a film club, the cast and crew, before filming, and the pandemic gave us many weeks of this. And I wanted to share some of my references to my team because some of them never did a genre film before. So they were kind of like in the box of like the big Hollywood films that sometimes are here in the cinemas. But then I played to them like films like Possession. Jacob's Ladder was very important because it also has this aspect of someone that is cracking the bones of a character, and that's taking the character to travel around moments of his life. You know, Jacob's Ladder was a big influence also in terms of camera placement, like even like the party scene in Jacob's Ladder, that was a big inspiration for me for the punk scene in Huesera, for example. Also, Don't Look Now. I feel like what I love of Don't Look Now, Nicholas Roeg's film, is that it really builds the horror of the ambience or the atmosphere. And it has like, there's like a sensation that everything around you starts becoming weird, and everything that was like supposed to be harmonious and nice and like the cute family world starts becoming macabre and like weird or eerie, you know, and it starts feeling like nothing familiar is familiar anymore. And I love that of those films. And we also watched Possession, which really blew the minds of my team, because I feel like they were not expecting that kind of film to be horror as well. And of course, we also analyzed, we need to talk about Kevin from Lynn Ramsey. Even though it's not a horror film, I do think she uses a lot of horror tools to tell her stories. And of course, other films that have challenged concepts of maternal instinct, as Swallow and The Babadook. Like I could see like there were already big conversations in film about these themes. Of course, the Lost Daughter, that was after we filmed, but when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, yes, like we need more of this. So those are some of the films that we studied.
Great. Yeah, and I definitely have some questions about sound. And but before we do get to that, I did want to ask about the visual design as well, because actually the visual design is actually quite it's great and haunting, and you know, particularly the various kind of haunting agents that enter in The Woman Who Falls to the Street, and kind of the sprawling tangle spider-like bodies towards the end. You know, has certain resonance with the thing that came to my mind right away, and maybe because it's set in the forest, I'm not sure, but is that there's a shot of a kind of a tangle of bodies in Funcher's Antichrist. Yeah. So, like, were there other things that were visually to help guide you to develop the visuals of the film?
I think that all that came with the writing. Like we were really worried. Like we wrote for a long time, for years, this project, and I think like at first I was kind of bringing the visuals from the legend of La Huesera to the film, but then I started feeling like I was forcing some other world to my character and her story. And then we understood that we really needed to dissect Valeria and her path and her process, who she is, like what's her family life. And then we started building like a broken reflection of herself, you know, and I feel like the character itself and getting to understand her, that's what allowed us to construct the entity of La Huesera that had to be particular to our character. So it really came from understanding her. And it's really a reflection of Valeria. Like it's like that concept that she wants to reach, that she wants to fulfill of this domestic life breaks apart, you know, and that's kind of like we understood like the aesthetic rules of La Huesera, which were female broken bodies, like fractured bodies, and the arachnid, which really was an influence from the Louise Bourgeois sculpture from France, that she compares the figure of the spider with motherhood. So those two aspects, like the broken female bodies and the spider, the spiderish and the spider webs aspects were we collided them, and that's how we had those basic rules. And we also knew that every time the Huesera had to be closer until she takes over, you know, and I am also a believer that on certain point you need to show the poker cards, you know, you need to, it's very hard, like some filmmakers, I feel like they want to keep it hidden, but to me at least it's important to show it in a moment. And we had a very limited budget, of course. It's a small film, and in Mexico it's not that we have like great like a VFX or something like that, also that I don't really love that. So I was really breaking my head of like, how do I take my character to that point of understanding that she's falling apart, like she's completely breaking down, because that's what La Huesera does. She fractures her little by little until this cathartic moment. And that's when I understood that we could really build this with actual bodies, you know, and we found these woods that are actually in the middle of Mexico City in Chapultepec, which is actually a kind of touristy area, but that to me it really looked like a spider web. And then we casted the dancers, and we rehearsed for a while, and that's how we got to this scene that is like the climax of the film.
Yeah, and actually it hadn't even, I mean, I think it actually crossed my mind, but I didn't. I probably should have written a question about this, but there's almost certain like Buto elements in terms of some of the dancing, like the way that this, you know, kind of particularly the way that the spider-like figures move. It's
but what was the question? Sorry, like that.
Oh, it's actually not so much a question, really. It's almost more of a comment, just in terms of the Buto-like kind of movement. Buto Japanese is a Japanese dance. Then actually, if
okay, now I understand what you mean.
Yeah, and actually, it's just coming to my mind right now. Of course, is the way that Sadako comes out of the television, and you know, yeah. So there's almost like spider-like qualities to her fingers when she's moving on the floor as well.
Yeah.
But
no,
anyways,
it's very true. But I have to say that when I had the image, we hired this amazing choreographer from Mexico. His name is Diego Vega, and he loves body horror. So he was very excited about being a part of the film. And he worked, like he conceptualized many of the movements, and it all came from the story of like the script. So that was very cool.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, let's start to talk about sound, and I think it certainly is striking. The sound design is really kind of emphasizes or embellishes your visual images to a large extent. And I'm a strong component, or I love sound design. I think it works so well. And so you did mention, I think it was Jacob's Ladder you mentioned as a possible influence for the cracking bone. I guess one of the other examples that I was thinking of was the newer version of Suspiria, Guadagnino Suspiria, particularly when Olga is kind of like a marionette and gets her body all tangled up and broken. Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit more about the sound design, particularly like the cracking bones?
Of course. So as I was saying, like, I think like the writing, when you keep doing it a lot, like I'm kind of like a true believer of the process of rewrite. I mean, at least like the teacher that I learned the most here from screenwriting, that's her theory, and I really subscribe to it. And I feel like when you keep rewriting and rewriting, you start getting the answers. So we understood that the character had this aspect, this anxious aspect of cracking her knuckles all the time, and that when we understood that, it was very like helpful, because we understood that these feelings of her came with a sound, and then we build a whole entity, like the horror of the film, out of that aspect of her personality. So this anxiety that comes with holding something emotional becomes this monster, and starts breaking your bones down. So when we understood that, that was really thanks to the writing. I think that came with the sound concept, and we took it to the extreme, like we had this sound, and the image also, the fractures, like going in an crescendo, I guess. So that was a big part. We did watch Suspiria, actually. That was one of our references also for the kind of texture of the kind of broken bones we wanted. But I also have to say that I am a director that I really and I focus on horror. I really love the horror genre, but I don't like to bring effects from other worlds, or like the classic drone sounds, like these low sounds that are used in horror films. I don't like to use that. So my sound designer did suffer for a while, because I was not letting him use any of that. So he was like, but then how am I going to build like the horror moments? And I was like, well, we have enough with Valeria's world, like she's surrounded by sounds, like her apartment, there's sounding in her apartment, there's sound in her street, there's so much sounds in Mexico City that surround us, and we can hear them all the time. It's like we for example, there's a lot of sounds of kids or babies screaming or like crying in other apartments in her building. Maybe they're very subtle, but like we use like what we could hear in the streets and in her world, her domestic world. Like those sounds were the ones that were like the base, like the everything was conceptualized out of her world that was surrounding her. So whenever she got into this, like the horror scenes of the film, we use those same sounds and maybe distort them or transform them, but we really stuck with not bringing something from other worlds. We stuck to her habitat, or wherever she was at the moment.
Yeah, and of course, like as we saw in the trailer as well, the breaking apart of the chicken, like that's just like clearly it's emphasized, but it's not like overdone. But it's integrated into the world, but still has that kind of disturbing. It adds to that breaking apart of Valeria's.
Thank you. Yes, one concept that I use a lot with my sound designers is like the sound close-up. So the same way that you do a close-up or like an extreme close-up in an image, you can do the same with sound. Like you can eliminate everything else and just give focus to one sound, in this case, a bone fracture of the bone. And I feel like that's more than enough to make it very horrific. It kind of takes you away of reality for a second. And I think our minds, we do that all the time. Like sometimes we're so stressed with something that is like that we can hear around us, and our brain kind of gives focus only to that sound, which is very like it gives a lot of anxiety. So we were trying to give that representation in the film.
Yeah, no, exactly. Actually, reminds me of the use of sound in Chan-wook Park's Stoker. There's like elements where he emphasizes the cracking of an egg, or he emphasizes like you can almost hear a spider crawling on the leg of the female character. And I really like that idea of a extreme close-up and sound like that. That's great. I love that. Yeah. And actually that leads me to my next question, which is, again, as I mentioned before, I'm a huge proponent of the use of sound, particularly in the horror genre, but in other genres as well. But it's when we actually really examine a film that is viscerally affecting to us, and we actually truly look at it, it's often the sound design that's responsible for that. Can you talk a little bit about the use of sound design to have that visceral feeling, like not just the kind of story component, like we understand Valeria is breaking apart, but that has that visceral impact on us as a spectator.
Of course, I mean, like, I'm like, yeah, Huesera is horror, but I agree with you. Like, this is like, so we're working in a media that is like 50% is sound. And I think that it's very important to build it also with it. Like, it's not something that should just be like surrounding it. It's kind of like, you can find ways to push the story or to push a feeling that you want to represent in certain scenes with just the sound, and that could be more than enough. And I think, like, in horror, something that I really find very interesting is how these genres tend to give us like a physical reaction. And that's, I like what you're saying, like this visceral. I feel like visceral means that you kind of feel it in your guts. And I love that from horror, you know, and it's something that I think I'm very proud that we found this leitmotif of the cracking bones, because I do think that a fracture and the sound of a fracture, that's the sound itself, has a physical reaction in our bodies, and the same way as a knife in an eye. The image of a knife getting into an eye, like in Buñuel and Dali short film, is very cinematic because it has a physical reaction, and I think that's a very cinematic thing to do. You know, I feel like I always try, like in my different projects now that I'm working, to me it's very important to find those images or those sounds, which I think that maybe in certain ways it could be even more powerful, to find sounds that have like a immediate like punch in your face in terms of emotion. And I think it's very hard to express on words what you feel when you see or when you hear a bone fracture. It's really instinctive, and I think that's a very powerful tool for cinema.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is my last prepared question, and it's adjacent to sound, certainly related, but it's the soundtrack. I really enjoyed the soundtrack, and it's actually the soundtrack plus, because it's not just the soundtrack that we hear, but there's also little references that I really liked, particularly like Valeria's Cure T-shirt, like that struck, you know, revealing something about myself. And then the album cover had certain resonances with other album covers that I've seen. There's a Christian Death album that has
I really like Christian Death.
Yes, wow. There's a I think it's maybe their first album that has a very similar design.
Yes, but, yes, that classic, like the Black Album, no? With yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts about the soundtrack and how you put that together, and
Of course. So it really came from a very personal world of mine. I've been playing in bands since I was also a teenager. I've been very involved in the Mexico City punk scene since a long time ago. And I think, like, punk for me, it really came with a lot of like a worldview, I guess. Like, it was always a blanket for me. And I love the fact that in many ways, like, punk, like, it can be played by anyone. You know, you don't have to have you don't have to be an expert or anything in any instrument to belong in that. So I wanted to give that to the character. I thought that was a very important blanket for Valeria to have. And then it was really great to bring that, because it's a world that I understand, and that I wanted to bring some of like the legendary Ibero-American punk, which many of them are actually post-punk from these countries. And it was awesome that they say yes. You know, there's bands, like there's a very legendary band from Mexico City from the 80s, which is Las Ánimas del Cuarto Oscuro, we have one of their songs, and then one other band from Spain, Décima Víctima, and another one from Peru, Delirios Crónicos, and then also punk bands from friend of mine, and even one of my bands is like it's the one in the flashback scene. That's one of the bands that I played with some of my best friends. So it was something that it kind of gave a sound identity to the film that I was very proud of, and that it really comes from a personal world. But I think that I found a way to make it important for the character as well. And it's very important to say that also the score was designed by two of my friends here in Mexico that belong to the punk scene, it's their first film, but they're both very talented musicians. Like, one of them, he's from Venezuela, Cabeza de Vaca, and the other one, friend from here, he's also in the free jazz scene here. His name is Gibran Androide. They're super talented. Every time I see them play, it's like they get you into hypnosis. And they were very excited to have a first film. They love horror, and I think the fact that they come from these worlds kind of really push for the identity, for the sound, like the audio identity I wanted to give to the film. And actually, the image that she brings out of the box, like it's like the Valeria's closet that I wanted to put all these past that she don't want to look at in that closet. There are many albums there from other punk bands from Mexico and from Latin America. But that image is actually an illustration from Eric Drucker. He's a New Yorker illustrator, and I really love this image because I think like it really portrays immediately how many times like women or female bodies are just locked in certain expectations, you know, and it's very hard to break away from those expectations. So, and I wanted a character like Valeria to have that hidden in the closet, and someone like Octavia to have that framed in her wall. So I wanted to give that contrast between these two characters.
Right. Yeah. No. It's very evident that I don't know, the way that we wrap up our identities with the kind of the musical scene, and Valeria definitely, it's clear that it's such a big part of her identity, but she obviously has tried to repress it. But yeah,
exactly. And the Cure shirt was very important for me too, because that was an inheritance of a friend that was very inspiring me when I grew up, and he passed away. So it was kind of like a way to give like a honor to him.
Nice. Yeah, great. Okay. Maybe we can turn to the questions from the audience. And Francisco, are you going to be moderating this?
Yes, I got you. Yeah,
right.
Good. All right. Thank you so much, Aaron. So yeah, we got some great questions here from the students. Here we're starting off just a very, I'm sure, question you're going to answer many times from here. It's just an anonymous user. It's asking what was your process like getting into the industry, and did you always know you wanted to be a director?
It was I think like the thing that was really helpful for me is that I knew since a long time ago, because of friends or teachers, professors, that I had to be patient. I did knew since I was a teenager that I wanted to be a director, but I also knew that I had to be very patient for that. So I started doing short films when I started film school, which was 2009. So it's more than 10 years ago. It's almost 15 years ago, I think. And I kind of knew that it was going to take me a while to be able to direct a feature, but I just stayed there. I did like 6 or 7 short films throughout the years. And I started working I worked before film school because I didn't get into the film school the first year. I didn't pass the test. I worked in many short films. I worked as a art assistant and production, a PA. I was working every area on the short films from other students that were already in the film school. And then when I got in, I started also working as a sound recordist. I don't know how to say it in English, but I was recording sound on set. And then I started working later as a script supervisor. So I worked as a script supervisor in different features. And when I started writing Huesera, I was already very connected, I guess, in the industry here in Mexico, because the film schools here are not so big, so we kind of like really know each other, or like we have friends of friends that are also involved in film. So you start making your community, and for Huesera, I started writing in 2017 with my co-writer Avia Castillo, and little by little we started to understand who needed to be our team. And I feel like I was really following my gut, because you need to surround yourself by the right people, I guess, like the people that really want to tell your story in a passionate way, and then are not gonna just do it because it's work, because features, especially first features, they're so small and you have so limited budget that you need passionate people that are gonna be okay if you ask them for double work what they would usually do, or they're gonna, we all got like very limited, like very limited payment, but it was more about many of us in Huesera, it was our first feature as well. So we were really working because we were having an opportunity to finally make a film. So we put all our heart and guts there. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Great first effort from everyone. So Gary here says, congratulations on the film. You mentioned this before we got on. It was, you're premiering the film in Mexico. What was that like? And just what was the response there?
Well, thank you. Well, we actually we've been we premiered in Tribeca last year, so it's been a long time of going to festivals and the genre community. It's been great, but we had our commercial release, like our premiere here in Mexico 2 days ago, and then the week before in the US. So I was able to be there for the release tour in different cities, and it's been amazing. Like honestly, I am very inspired by many films that maybe are very unknown, or like growing up, I was watching films that were hard to find, or and to me, that was enough. If Huesera was a film that somebody would find in a weird way and they would connect with it, that was enough, because to me, like the human connection that comes with films is what inspired me to become a filmmaker. But like now having access here in Mexico, for example, we're having 800 copies. So the film is going to be around the whole country, and we're also having a release in Central America and Peru and Chile. So I can't believe it. Those are numbers. So numbers for me are hard to understand. But what it means is that many people, that also people that are just gonna go to the cinema on Friday and they're gonna see the poster and they're gonna be like, okay, I picked this one. Like that situation to me is crazy, and I'm very excited about it. Like that's why we do the film, so people can watch it. So it's been great. I feel like the film has been very supported, and I'm very glad about that.
Wow, that's great to hear. And I want to get back to the film festival circuit process in a second, but Gary, just finishing out Gary's question here. Did you see that Guillermo del Toro retweeted something about your film, and just kind of following up, what is that like, being applauded by some of your peers,
That was wild.
Yeah.
I screamed when I saw it. I was very excited. Of course, I mean, he's a big influence and so inspiring for me. So and Guillermo del Toro, we all love him in Mexico. Like there's really so much love for him, for his work, but also for him as a figure, because he really supports Mexican filmmakers, and he really makes a big work, for us to have the funds that make these films exist, and every time the funds have been in risk, because of the pandemic, the funds in the Mexican Film Institute almost disappeared, but he came and fight to keep them, and he managed to do it. So the fact that he retweeted something of Huesera was like, oh my God, thank you, because that really helps a lot for the film to have more recognition. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and also just the fact that he took the time and watched the movie, resonated with it, I'm sure that just speaks volumes, just that of itself. So this next one we're going to kind of take in 3 parts. This next question is from Alicia. She asks, what were some of the worst fears you faced before, during, and after making the film?
Wow. Well, before, there was always a fear of am I crazy? Am I pushing for something that is impossible? How am I gonna do? Because I mean, to make a film, it costs more than a house. I never dreamed to having a house. How sometimes you do get very scared of oh my God, how am I gonna make it? And there were moments where I thought we had negatives, or we had no support, that I really thought oh, maybe if this fund or if this production company are saying no, is because maybe that content or the idea is not good enough. And I was putting all of my workforce and all of my investment. I was so invested that I put all my when you play poker, all my
all in. Yeah,
all my coins were in the same spot of Huesera, and then I brought all these talented people around me believing in the project, and I felt oh my God, if this doesn't come out well, I will disappoint all of them. So that was very horrifying on the pre-production, because I was kind of making a promise to a lot of people that I admire and that I'm very thankful for. So I'm very happy that it paid out because it was a risky project. It's not common to have this kind of horror films in our country. So that was a period in the pre-production. And then on the production, so, my big advice for filmmakers that are giving their first steps, or they want to do their feature, is that you have to prepare a lot. Like, there's no space for improvisation, really. Like, if you're gonna make a feature, I understand there's like this like romantic thing about improvisation, but that only comes with with preparation. Like, I was so prepared. We had different versions of our shot list. Everything was planned. Every line, I worked so much with my actors. You have to involve your actors. Like, all of them had access to the whole script, like months or even years before the filming. So all of them had their personal biographies. There's so many backstories behind every character. So many of those conversations or table conversations that I had are reflected on the decisions on the last draft of the script. And then everything was planned. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, every color, like, everything was planned. So then when you come with this map to the set, you're not so fearful, because you have, every time you get lost, or like you're running in time, like there's something terrible happened, that like there's like a storm and you have to film outside, like you have a plan that you can go back to, and you say like, okay, I'm gonna film this scene first, or like there's ways to adjust. But if you're taking the big decisions on set, I don't understand the filmmakers that do that, because I would panic. Like, you have to have a plan. And the fact that you have a plan also allows you to see the magic on set, like also allows you to see like, oh my God, actually this shot is better than this, or the actors could be like, oh my God, I just had this idea with this object, or maybe I can change to this. And then you're so relaxed because you have your plan, that you're able to see those propositions from your colleagues or from yourself. And the moment we had many moments, my cinematographer and myself, to be very inspired on set, because something new happened that we didn't plan, because you have many talented people around there. They're going to have cool ideas. And we were able to see those, because if we were stressed trying to understand the shot list, maybe someone would have come with a proposition, and then we wouldn't have been able to see that, because we would have been like focused on how to do it. But then we knew how to. And then if someone had like a better idea, we were like, oh, actually, yeah, that's better. So
you had that foundational like fallback option, like, okay, that may not be the best idea, we still have this. So,
exactly. And you need to trust that you have a team, like a team of very creative people that are invested on the project as well. And so my big advice, I was never so scared on set, because I had a preparation, and I think that like that's what saves you on set, like of all the stress that sets come with. And then now after filming, or like the last part of the question was about post-production, or more like about the release?
I guess whichever one you think was a little more fearful for you, just
like after the filming.
Just after, yes. The question is, after making the film. So I guess more about the distribution process, all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess like once I finished filming, I was like, okay, oh my God, the most difficult thing like was done. Like now I'm free. Like I'm gonna be okay. Like everything, like the most difficult part was done. And then that's a lie. Like the post-production and the release, all the distribution aspects, it's very hard, because also I didn't knew anything about it. And then you start understanding how important is to get a good distributor, because the film could be good, you could have worked for years in it, but then if you don't have distribution, nobody's gonna watch it, or like,
right. Yeah.
So I was really invested also to investigate and like really pushing to have access to theatrical release, because we make the films for films to be watching the big screen. So I really didn't wanted to let that go. I really didn't wanted Huesera to be a direct to platform film. And so I really pushed for that, and I was scared of not being able to find a good home for Huesera, which at the end of the day we did manage to have great homes, and both in the US and Latin America and Mexico, we're having access to theatrical releases, which is really the dream. And so I think like I have faith, kind of. I kind of like build some faith that I was scared of not having. Like in the terms of like, for some moments I thought, oh, this is gonna be very hard. Maybe I'm gonna have to just say yes to direct platform or like a very small distribution. But then we kind of like kept on pushing and pushing until we found a great distribution. So it kind of brought faith, and I'm seeing like in fellow filmmakers and colleagues here that they're also faithful after seeing how Huesera is being well received for their films as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear that kind of it was the before and after production that really kind of like was the more stressful part. I think people would assume that it's, the shot list and getting everything right. But yeah, it sounds like it's just like once you're making the film, like you're in your zone, you're in your element, that kind of thing. And touching back on the film festival circuit, I'm assuming that's kind of like the first time you're showing the film to like the general audience. I'm curious, like I'm sure young filmmakers would love to know just like what was that process like submitting the film, and also just like was that very nerve-wracking, just like sitting there, the movie's about to start and you're just like, are you just like on pins and needles at that point, or?
Well, it was amazing, really. Like it was like I traveled so much last year with the film, and it was so cool to see how the film connected with different audiences from different parts of the world. Like sometimes you're fearful of like, because we were trying to be very specific to the life of this kind of woman in Mexico City. So sometimes I was worried like, oh, is this only gonna connect with people from here? But then you understand, and like so many of my favorite films that they're so specific from somewhere else that I've never been, but then those windows and those like deep introspections of characters sometimes become very universal. So I'm very happy to see, like I've had, like it's been awesome to sit on with different audiences. And sometimes if I had the chance, like these theaters that have like 2 levels, that I would go upstairs and watch the people from upstairs and see the reactions in the horror scenes. It's been amazing. And honestly, like the most fulfilling thing for me has been that I've had people approach me after the screenings that are so moved in the ways that I've felt moved with other films in a movie theater. And to me, that's more than enough. Like I've had conversation of women that have gone through processes like the one of the character in the film that really approach me saying that they feel less lonely, or they feel like they have a company now, or they had like a new kind of company with the film. And yes, that's been like so amazing. So it's been great, really. It's been very interesting to have the chance to travel around the world with the film. It was stressful, of course. Like you're always like in the suspense of like which festival is gonna say yes, and that's horrible. That's like doing casting for actors, which is really, because you put in your heart, like you're putting something that is so sacred and important and personal for you, that having like someone that you don't know like saying yes or no to it is painful. But I feel like it's very important to be vulnerable and don't be afraid of doing it. Like you always have that no, and then if you get that yes, like that's gonna be fantastic, So and yeah, XYZ has also done an amazing job, and they've been very supportive with the whole process of festivals.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear that people were able to like relate to the like how specific it was. There's that phrase, there's like a phrase like there's commonality and specificity. Like, if you just make it super like narrow it down to its like absolute points, like you will find that audience. So that's really cool to hear that, that happened. And, especially there's like themes of like the postpartum depression of it all, and just like the kind of the relationship drama kind of it. Like it's just very beautifully done. And yeah, of course. Here we have a great question here from Mariana. She says, I'm also a Mexican filmmaker and I love horror. I would like to know if there's some specific myth of legends that inspire your work, whether it be for this film specifically or just in general.
Of course, yes. So the film is inspired on the legend of La Huesera, which is really, and hi, Mariana, I'm very happy to know another fellow filmmaker from Mexico. And La Huesera is not as known as La Llorona or other tales. And I found that actually around, I lost my mom in 2014, and a friend of mine gave me this book to accompany me throughout that process of loss. And that book is Women Who Run with Wolves from Clarissa Pincola. And she analyzes different tales from Mexico and border towns in between the US and Mexico. And one of those is La Huesera, which speaks about an elder woman that digs out bones in the desert and puts together a skeleton, and then makes a ritual to give that entity freedom, and then that it kind of turns into a wolf who, when it runs away, it has the figure of a woman. And it's a very different tale, as you see from the film, but the heart of it really speaks about like going through difficult or painful processes of digging into yourself and finding those deep or rooted truths or questions that you don't want to face, that they are painful to look at, and kind of like looking at our own shadows, and in order to set ourselves free in or accept those areas of ourselves. So I really hold to the heart and the aspect of the bones of the legend, and then we built the story out of that concept.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to be a little selfish here and just ask one of my own questions. So with like, I'm technically a student, so this counts, this falls. So the main character of Valeria is such a great character, like there's amazing kind of just expression she makes, some amazing kind of body horror moments, like you mentioned before, but also you just root for her as a character. So I was just wondering, just like what was the process of working with Natalia, I believe is the main actor's name.
Yes.
Like what was the process of like maybe just like the most difficult part of like finding that performance and that character?
Yes, I was very lucky. I had a great casting director she's actually one of the witches in the ritual scene. She's Rocio Belmont. And she brought the casting of Natalia. And I've seen Natalia before here in the theater. She's big in theater in Mexico. And I remember being very impressed by her work before. So the moment I saw she was doing the cast, I was like, oh my God, this woman, I remember her perfectly, from seeing her in the theater. And the thing with Natalia is that she's a mystery. She's really great in the sense that is a kind of actor that you really believe that she's going through a very painful moment, like that to believe someone that they're looking to a monster, or that they're feeling a bone fracture, that's not an easy thing to do. And she has she has access to that. And that really has to do with her work with being an actress, like she's very prepared. She has such a bodily control. She proposed so many aspects of the bodily aspects of Valeria that were really perfect, or like they made so much sense with the theme of the film and with the character, like all these things that Valeria is holding, like to society, like she's like keeping it inside, but then every time she has an access to liberate, you can see that she's very brusque, like there's something in her body that is really contained and that wants to liberate, and that was a big proposal of Natalia. And yeah, I mean, like she's a mom, and she really worked from a very specific and intimate process that has to do with her own maternity, and that was very generous of her. Like we opened up and had very deep and important conversations that were very cathartic for us in personal ways that are really reflected in the film. So it was great. You really have to give your actors a chance to work their characters before set, because they give you gold. They're very creative people. They propose, there's many proposals in the film that came from ideas of the actors, and Natalia was huge in that sense for the film.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Now another question here. What are some of the parts of like the film process, not just making it, but just the whole entire process that they don't necessarily prepare you in film school, that you would like to kind of pass on to any young filmmakers in the audience?
The ones that were not from film school, like from outside?
Yeah, like any aspects that you kind of got taken off guard, in the process of this film.
Of course, I think like one big thing for me is that you really have to pick a theme or something that from your worldview or that you believe in, that you're very, very passionate about, because it's going to be such a long process. I mean, at least for me, it was that you have to be able to fall in love with it again and again. Like it has to be, like for me, this theme or what I wanted to speak about with Huesera is really profound for me. And even now I'm passionate about it. And I can keep on going and investigating and reading about it. And I think you really need to go for those ones, because if you don't have something that you want to hold on to, it's going to be easy to let it go and see like, oh, now I have a better idea, and I see like it's very common in filmmaking that you write one script and then you have 5 no's, which are very common, and then you're like, no, maybe it's not good, I'm gonna go for the next one, and then you have 10 and none of them were made. And that could have happened to Huesera, because I had many negatives, but I was obsessed with it. I was like, I'm gonna keep on pushing until it was made. So I feel like you really need to pick something that you're passionate about. So that's a big one. And another one is that you really have to surround yourself by people that can talk to you horizontally. Like, it's very hard to be a director when you're surrounded, or if you're trying to work with people that don't value your voice, or that they're like really not listening, or they're condescendent, or like, you have to surround yourself with people that believe you and that they want to talk to you in that same level. And then you have to work with your team in the same way. You have to be the most horizontal as possible, because filmmaking is such a pyramidal world, that those relationships, at least for me, I wanted to prove myself that it didn't have to be that way for Huesera, and it really wasn't like that. I feel very proud that I had a team that we were very how would you say, like, compassionate, and we were able to be vulnerable and open up and don't feel judged. We were really speaking in a horizontal way, so that's important. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I got 2 more questions for you. Starting off, just a quick, another question from Gary. As far as the ending, what is it now? Is there a definitive kind of explanation that you wanted to run with, or did you want the audience to, kind of interpret, decide, like, and have discussions about the ending, like the interpretation, the meaning of it?
Definitely, I wanted the audience to have their interpretations, but also I knew, like, we started this project with the ending. Like, I knew where I wanted to take my character to. And because, I had someone in my family that took that kind of decision, and she was completely judged by it. And I just had a very bad concept of her. So I was like, okay, how do I complexify a character like this? Like, how a story can change this concept, and that was the main goal behind this film. So we started there, and I feel like what I really liked of her process is that she breaks down in order to have the chance of reconstruction. And I wanted to have that reconstruction being a concept that the audience takes home,
Yeah, they're great. Yeah. And then one last question for you. What is one thing that if you could go back and tell yourself at the beginning of the process of making this film, what would you like to tell yourself?
Oh my God, I would tell myself, like, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself, because you're gonna have so much voices around that don't come from the heart. Like, you have to surround with people that are speaking from their hearts and from their best intentions. And if you're not very sure of yourself, that sometimes it's easy to get lost and be fearful, and even get to the point of, like, saying, like, no, this film makes no sense, like, this is not good. And if you don't trust yourself, like, it took me a while to trust myself and to understand that it was a project that it was worth it, and so you really have, I wish I was more trusting of my process, because I was working so much, I was studying so much, I was putting so much heart into it, that I should have been more clear about it because it got me to very difficult situations, the fact that I was more trustful, or like confident on certain areas. So I would really give that advice to the filmmakers, like, you have to, like, if you're doing the work, if you know that you're doing it and you're pushing and you're working, you have to trust that you know what you're doing, so you have to trust that.
Yeah, there you go. All right, everyone. So on behalf of the CSU Entertainment Alliance, all of our students and faculty, first of all, thank you to Mr. Aaron Kerner for moderating this panel. And another big thank you to Michelle for the time and just, like, the super insightful answers. And yeah, another big thank you to XYZ Films, who helped make this event happen. And for everyone watching, please be sure to check out the resources and opportunities from the CSUEA on our website, csuentertainment.com, our social media, again, at the CSUEA on all platforms. And lastly, go watch Huesera in theaters and on video on demand. You will never hear bones cracking the same way again. Thank you again. Michelle, did you have anything you wanted to say before we log off?
No, thank you so much for this space. I love this. I love being able to speak with fellow filmmakers. I was always very inspired by this, and it's really amazing to be on this side now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. All right, thanks everyone for coming. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.